Silence. It's supposed to be powerful, a weapon of self-respect, a strategy to create distance, make them reflect, and maybe even regret. You've heard it before: step back, go quiet, and they'll come running. But what happens when your silence does nothing? No reaction, no curiosity, no shift in behavior. It's like throwing a rock into the ocean and expecting waves, but instead, the water stays calm, like you were never there. You start wondering, did they ever care at all? Did I mean so little to them that my absence doesn't even register? It feels like instead of making them notice, you've just faded further into the background. And that feeling? It's brutal. It makes you question yourself, your worth, and whether silence was the right move in the first place. But here's the thing: silence is only as powerful as the foundation beneath it. Used correctly, it can shift the entire dynamic. Used wrong, it's nothing more than an empty pause, one they won't even notice. If your silence isn't affecting them, it's not because silence doesn't work. It's because you haven't made them feel why your silence matters. And if they don't feel your absence, it's because your presence wasn't strong enough to begin with. Most people assume that pulling away is enough to trigger regret. That distance alone will make someone realize what they lost. But that's not how human nature works. Regret isn't caused by silence. Regret is caused by contrast, the difference between what was and what is now. If they don't feel the loss of you, it's because they never truly valued your presence in the first place, and that's a hard truth to swallow. So if your silence isn't making an impact, it's time to shift the game. Silence isn't just about going quiet. It's about creating an undeniable void, a void that can't be ignored, a void that forces them to feel your absence so deeply they have no choice but to question everything. And that's exactly what we're going to break down today: why your silence might not be working, the mistakes you could be making, and, most importantly, the exact steps you need to take to turn things around and make them feel it. Because if you're going to be silent, you better make sure it echoes. And listen, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly what to do to turn things in your favor. You'll walk away not just with clarity, but with power. And if you want to unlock that, stay with me till the very end, because that's where I'll reveal the one crucial thing that changes everything. Before we dive in, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit the bell icon so you never miss out on powerful insights like this. And drop a comment below with the affirmation, "My silence is my power." Say it, believe it, and watch how things begin to shift in your favor. Now, let's begin. 1. Your energy still reaches them. Cutting off contact isn't enough. You can stop texting, stop calling, and disappear from their life. But if your energy is still chasing them, they'll feel it. And when someone knows they still have a grip on you, even in silence, they don't feel the loss. Think about it. You might have gone quiet, but are you really detached? Are you still checking their social media, wondering what they're doing, who they're with, or if they've moved on? Do you still replay past conversations in your head, hoping for a different ending? That invisible attachment is louder than words. It lingers like a shadow they can sense, even when you're nowhere to be found. Silence, without true detachment, is like trying to put out a fire while still standing in the smoke. The flames may not be visible, but the heat is still there, and they can feel it. That's why your absence isn't hitting them the way you expected. They don't feel the void because, on an energy level, you haven't really left. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Now ask yourself, Do you really have power over this situation? Do you control how they think, how they feel, or what they do? Of course not. What you do control is where your energy goes, and that's the real game changer. So where is your energy right now? Are you spending it on rebuilding yourself, on becoming stronger, sharper, and more focused? Or are you pouring it into thoughts about them, waiting for their attention, hoping they'll notice the silence? Because here's the truth, real silence isn't about what you stop doing. It's about what you start doing. Imagine two people walking away from the same relationship. One spends their days lurking in the shadows, overanalyzing every detail, waiting for a sign. The other, they step into a new chapter. They invest in their mind, their health, their purpose. They focus on what makes them powerful, not on what was lost. Over time, one becomes a ghost of the past, while the other becomes someone worth remembering. And here's the irony. The one who moves forward is the one who gets noticed. Not because they played a game, but because their absence carries weight. It's backed by action, by growth, by undeniable strength. That's the kind of silence that demands attention, not the kind that waits. If they don't feel your absence, it's because your presence is still chasing them in ways you don't even realize. You have to cut that cord, not out of anger, not to get a reaction, but because your peace depends on it. The moment you stop giving them your energy, even in thought, is the moment the silence finally becomes real, and that's when they feel it. Epictetus once said, "If you wish to be free, do not wish for things to be as you would like them, but rather as they are." Accept reality for what it is. Stop waiting. Stop hoping. Instead, become. Become so grounded in yourself that your silence isn't a game. It's a reflection of how far you've outgrown them. Let them feel that, not through words, not through waiting, but through the undeniable power of someone who no longer chases. 2. They don't see your worth. Yet, but that's about to change. If your silence doesn't shake them, if they don't seem to notice your absence, then the truth is simple. Your presence didn't leave a deep enough mark. And that's not meant to tear you down. It's meant to wake you up. You see, people don't miss what they don't value, and they don't value what doesn't stand out. If you were just another predictable figure in their life, someone always available, always eager, always needing something from them, then your silence doesn't feel like a loss. It feels like space, maybe even relief. But here's the real question. Are you someone worth missing? Not in their eyes, but in reality. Have you built yourself into a person whose presence is undeniable, whose energy is so strong that when it's gone, the difference is felt immediately? Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." The same applies here. The question isn't why they don't care about your silence. The question is, have you become the kind of person they can't ignore? Picture two types of people. The first is always seeking validation, texting too much, over-explaining, trying too hard to be liked. They think silence will work like magic, that suddenly disappearing will create desire. But when they go silent, it's not noticed, because the energy they brought wasn't something that demanded respect. It was something that begged for approval. Now imagine the second person. They know their worth. They never beg, never chase, never need to be validated. Their silence isn't a trick or a tactic. It's a natural expression of their strength. They walk away with certainty, knowing that whoever fails to recognize their value isn't someone they need to convince. And that kind of energy leaves a mark. If they don't feel your absence, it's because you haven't truly built your presence, not in their mind, but in the world. Are you focusing on yourself, Are you sharpening your mind, strengthening your body, building something meaningful? Are you surrounding yourself with people who uplift you instead of chasing those who drain you? Because when you do these things, when you truly elevate, you stop worrying about whether they notice your silence. And ironically, that's exactly when people start to notice. That's when they start asking themselves, why aren't they chasing me anymore? What changed? Epictetus once said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." When you stop wanting validation from others and start demanding more from yourself, everything shifts. Your presence becomes rare. Your silence carries weight. You no longer have to play games because you've become the kind of person who naturally stands out. And if they still don't see your worth, then someone else will. Someone who recognizes the energy you bring, the value you hold, the force you've become. That's when your silence speaks volumes, not because you were hoping for it to, but because you've become the kind of person people can't help but notice. 3. You're playing their game, not yours, and that's why you're losing. Here's a hard truth. If your silence is just a trick to make them react, if you're waiting for them to notice, to reach out, to regret, then you're not in control. You're still playing their game. And the moment your peace depends on their response, you've already lost. You might think you're being bold, that your silence is a power move, but every time you wonder, why haven't they reached out? Do they miss me yet? You're handing them all the power. They're not winning because they're ignoring you. They're winning because your sense of value is still tied to them. And that's not strength. That's a trap. Silence, when rooted in expectation, will always fail. Why? Because you're still clinging to an outcome. You're waiting for a response, for a sign, for some proof that your absence matters. And when it doesn't come, you spiral. You start questioning your worth, or worse, you double down, posting things to get their attention, trying new ways to trigger a reaction, convincing yourself that one more move will finally make them see. But that's not power. That's desperation. Now, flip the script. What if silence wasn't about them at all? What if, instead of using it to control them, you used it to free yourself? Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." The real game changer is understanding that silence isn't about waiting. It's about moving forward. It's not about making them notice. It's about making sure you do. True silence is putting the phone down and not checking for signs. It's not needing updates, not seeking validation, not hoping they'll wake up and see your worth. It's about redirecting all that energy back into yourself. Because right now, ask yourself, what do I actually need to be doing for me? Your silence should be a shift, not a stunt. Hit the gym, not their profile. Pick up a book instead of picking apart their actions. Build something, improve something, grow into someone so focused on their own life that waiting for a reaction becomes the last thing on your mind. And here's the irony. When you truly let go, when you genuinely stop caring about whether they notice, that's often when they do. Not because you played a game, but because real detachment is rare. Most people act like they don't care while secretly hoping for a response. But those who truly detach, they carry a different kind of presence. A presence that doesn't chase. A presence that doesn't need to be validated. A presence that commands respect simply because it doesn't beg for it. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. If your silence isn't having the effect you expected, it's because you're still tied to the result. You're still playing a game where the rules are set by someone else. But the moment you stop reacting, stop waiting, stop hoping. That's when the game changes. Because now you're not playing theirs, you're playing your own. And the person who controls their own game, that's the person who truly wins. 4. They know you'll break. That's why your silence has no power. Silence only works if it's real. If it's just a move you're making to get a reaction, they can sense it. If it's something you've done before but couldn't sustain, they already know how this ends. They've seen the pattern. You pull away, you wait, and then, eventually, you crack. You reach out. You check in. You find a reason to break the silence. And when that happens, every moment of distance loses its weight. It becomes noise, predictable, empty, and meaningless. A true Stoic isn't just someone who acts unbothered. They are unbothered. Their silence isn't a ploy, it's a way of life. They don't use it as a test, a trick, or a punishment. They embody it because they understand that their energy is too valuable to waste on people who don't appreciate it. So, ask yourself, is your silence real, or is it just a waiting game? Because if deep down you're just hoping for them to notice, they'll feel it. And when silence is built on desperation, it collapses. People can sense when you're not acting from a place of power. That's why they're not taking it seriously. That's why it's not affecting them. Imagine this: someone pulls away from you. At first, you're confused. You wonder if they're mad, if they're trying to prove a point. But then, time passes. You realize they aren't just silent. They've disappeared from your world. They're not watching, not waiting, not hoping. They're gone. And suddenly their absence isn't just silence, it's felt. That's the difference between weak silence and strong silence. Weak silence waits for a reaction. Strong silence moves on. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." If you want your silence to have meaning, you need to stop worrying about what they do and start focusing on what you do. It's about you now, not them. Think of the person who decides to walk away but keeps checking their phone, keeps overthinking, keeps hoping for a sign. That's not power, that's hesitation. That's why they don't feel your absence. Now, picture someone else. They walk away and use that space to build, physically, mentally, emotionally. They pick up a new skill, surround themselves with people who value them, and become someone so deeply engaged in their own growth that they stop wondering about the past entirely. That's the silence that echoes. Epictetus said, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." And that's exactly what you need to do. Stop trying to control whether they notice. Stop waiting for them to react. Start building a life that no longer needs their validation. Because if you break, if you let emotions pull you back, if you go searching for something you already walked away from, you prove one thing: you were never in control, and they know it. That's why your silence doesn't work. It was never real in the first place. But the moment you shift your focus, the moment you stop acting detached and start being detached, everything changes. They might notice, they might not, but by then it won't matter, because you will have moved on to something greater. And that's the kind of silence no one can ignore. 5. Your silence is empty because you haven't moved yet. Silence without action is like a ship drifting aimlessly. It doesn't go anywhere, and it certainly doesn't make waves. If they're not noticing your absence, if nothing is shifting, it's because your silence is just time passing by. It's not silence they ignore, it's stagnation. You see, Silence only holds power when it's backed by movement. If all you're doing is sitting in the quiet, replaying memories, overanalyzing every detail, and hoping they suddenly realize your worth, then your silence is wasted. It becomes nothing more than a pause in your suffering, a void with no weight, no presence, no reason to be felt. Marcus Aurelius once said, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the very thing that feels like an obstacle, their distance, their lack of response, is actually the opportunity, but only if you choose to see it that way. Think about it. Two people go silent after a breakup or a falling out. The first one spends their time scrolling through old messages, checking their profile, stuck in a loop of nostalgia and regret. They replay moments in their mind, like an old movie, hoping the ending will somehow change. They are waiting. The second person? They take that silence and use it like fuel. They hit the gym consistently, not just to look better, but to feel stronger. They pick up the hobby they always pushed aside. They reconnect with people who bring out the best in them. They learn, they evolve, and over time their silence is no longer about waiting, it's about becoming. Now ask yourself, which one do you think is harder to ignore? The one who is stuck, or the one who is moving so fast they leave a trail behind them? People are drawn to growth. It's human nature. When you're actively working on yourself, you send a silent yet powerful message. I value myself enough to keep improving, with or without your attention. That's when silence starts to work. Not because you're trying to manipulate them into missing you, but because you've shifted your focus. And here's the irony. When you fully commit to this path, their reaction matters less and less. You become so focused on your own progress that whether or not they notice feels like a distant thought. And that's when your silence actually gains power. Not because it's a trick, but because you're no longer standing still, waiting for them to hear it. Epictetus once said, "First say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. If you want your silence to mean something, make sure it's carrying you somewhere." The real shift isn't in whether they notice, it's in whether you finally do. Because once you see your own worth, once you start moving in a direction that has nothing to do with them, everything changes. And when that happens, whether they feel your absence or not won't even matter, because you won't be looking back. 6. They don't feel the loss, because you never made an impact. Silence only carries weight when it leaves behind something valuable, something that was once there, filling the space. If your silence isn't affecting them, it's not just about them being indifferent. It's about whether your presence ever had enough depth to create a void. Because the truth is, people don't miss what they never truly felt. Think about it. When someone disappears from your life, the only time it really stings is when they brought something irreplaceable: wisdom, warmth, strength, or an energy that lingered long after they were gone. If your silence feels like nothing to them, it's a sign, not of their coldness, but of the fact that you may not have built a presence strong enough to be missed. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." The same principle applies here. Instead of wondering why they don't feel your absence, ask yourself, what is it about me that they're supposed to miss? Is it your ability to listen without judgment? The way you brought peace in moments of chaos? Your depth, your drive, your ability to make others feel understood? If none of these things stand out, then your silence might feel less like a loss and more like just another moment passing by. Now, imagine two different people walking away. One was inconsistent, passive, never really standing firm in who they were. When they leave, it's barely noticeable, like a whisper in the wind. The other, they carried themselves with quiet strength, confidence, and unwavering values. When they step back, there's an undeniable shift, an energy that lingers, like the scent of a familiar cologne or the memory of a comforting voice. The second person isn't missed because they wanted to be missed. They're missed because their presence had weight. That's the kind of presence you need to build. Epictetus once said, "Wealth consists not in having great possessions, but in having few wants." The lesson here: stop wanting someone to feel your absence and start becoming someone who is naturally unforgettable. Not because you're loud, not because you demand attention, but because your character, your values, and your impact are undeniable. This isn't about manipulation. It's not about stepping back just to create a reaction. It's about recognizing that if your silence doesn't shift the dynamic, the real work isn't in getting them to notice. It's in becoming the kind of person who commands respect effortlessly. So, if your silence isn't working, take it as a sign, not a failure, but a wake-up call. This is your opportunity to level up, to sharpen your mind, to build yourself into someone so focused on their own path that whether or not they notice becomes irrelevant. Because the ultimate truth, when you stop worrying about whether they feel your absence and start focusing on making your presence something unforgettable, that's when everything shifts. And by then, whether they feel the loss or not won't even matter, because you'll be too busy becoming someone who never has to chase being noticed in the first place. 7. They read. You like a book. And that's why. Your silence has no power. If someone can predict your every move, your silence becomes meaningless. It doesn't create curiosity. It doesn't shift the dynamic. It doesn't make them wonder what's happening. Instead, it becomes just another step in a pattern they've already figured out. Think about it. If your actions are as readable as an open book, where's the intrigue? Where's the space for them to reflect, to miss you, to feel that something is missing? Epictetus once said, "We suffer not from events, but from our judgment about them." That means the real impact of silence isn't in the silence itself. It's in how you carry yourself. It's in the energy behind it. Are you truly calm, centered, and self-assured? Or are you using silence like a baited hook, waiting for them to bite? Because if your silence is predictable, if they know exactly when you'll break, exactly when you'll check in, exactly when you'll start dropping hints, then it loses all weight. They don't feel the absence because they know it's temporary. Imagine this. You text them every morning without fail. One day, you decide to stop. At first, they might notice, but if they already know you'll eventually give in and reach out, what happens? The silence loses all its meaning. There's no real shift, no real tension, no real space created for them to feel your absence. Now, let's flip the script. Instead of using silence as a game, what if you embodied something deeper, emotional neutrality? Picture the ocean on a still day, calm, vast, and unshaken by storms. That's the kind of energy you need to cultivate. Not reactive, not manipulative, just solid, steady, and unfazed. When you reach that level of self-mastery, your silence isn't a tactic. It's a byproduct of self-respect. And that's what creates intrigue. Suddenly, they don't know what to expect from you because you're no longer reacting. You're no longer following the same predictable loops. You've stopped being a player in their game, and that alone forces them to start wondering. Let's say they pull back or go distant. The instinct might be to match that energy, to go silent, hoping it will make them chase. But that's not real control. That's just another reaction, another move in a game you never needed to play. A true Stoic doesn't operate that way. A true Stoic stays grounded, unmoved by things outside their control. Marcus Aurelius put it simply, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." This isn't about shutting them out. It's not about withholding attention to punish them. It's about becoming so balanced in yourself that their actions don't shake you. That's the real difference. That's what makes someone unreadable. Not forced mystery, but genuine self-control. Because mystery isn't about hiding. It's about not needing to be seen. When you no longer seek validation, when you no longer need a reaction, your energy shifts. You stop being predictable because your moves are no longer tied to them. And that's when your silence actually speaks. Not because you wanted it to, but because you became someone they can't easily figure out anymore, someone they can't quite grasp, someone who isn't playing the game, because they're too focused on winning their own. 8. Your silence means nothing, because they never knew your standards. Silence isn't a substitute for standards. It's not a shortcut to setting boundaries. If you've never communicated what you expect, what you value, and what you refuse to tolerate, then pulling away means nothing. It's like trying to enforce a law in a town where no one even knew the rules. It doesn't work. Think about it. How can someone respect boundaries that were never made clear? How can they know they've crossed a line if you never told them where the line was? Silence only works as a reminder of your standards, not as a way to set them. Marcus Aurelius once said, "Stand firm in your path with a clarity of purpose and let no one shake you from it." That's the key here, clarity. If you never clearly defined what you stand for, how can your absence make an impact? Imagine this. Someone in your life repeatedly disrespects your time, ignores your needs, or plays games. But instead of addressing it, you simply go silent, hoping they'll figure it out. The problem? They probably won't. Not because they don't care, but because you never made it clear what matters to you in the first place. Your silence becomes background noise, empty, unnoticed, meaningless. Now, picture a different scenario. This time, before stepping back, you've already made it clear. This is who I am. This is what I expect. This is what I will not tolerate. When you then go silent, it's not just distance. It's a statement. A statement that says, I don't argue. I don't beg. I don't repeat myself. I act. And that's when silence becomes powerful. Because silence isn't the strategy, it's the tool. If someone knows your standards, your silence reinforces them. If they don't, then all your silence does is leave them confused. The Stoics believed that power comes from living by your principles, not forcing others to follow them. Epictetus once said, "Freedom is found in clarity, for when you know yourself, no one can control you." That's why your silence will never hold weight unless it stands on a foundation of clear, unshakable standards. This isn't about explaining yourself over and over. It's not about over-explaining, convincing, or proving your worth. It's about saying it once, meaning it, and letting your actions do the rest. When people know exactly what you stand for, they also know what your silence means. And that's when it commands respect. Because silence without standards, that's just absence. But silence backed by clarity, that's presence, that's strength. That's the kind of stillness that doesn't beg for attention, it demands respect. So if your silence isn't having the impact you want, maybe it's not the silence that's the problem. Maybe it's time to go back to the beginning. Speak once, set your standards, and then let your silence do the rest. 9. Stop waiting. Start building. So what comes next? The answer is simple. Build. Stop waiting. Stop wondering. Stop wasting time hoping for a reaction that may never come. This isn't about them. It's about you. It's about becoming the kind of person who thrives, not because of external validation, but because of an unshakable inner foundation. Start where you are, with what you have. Hit the gym, not to prove something to them, but to remind yourself of your own strength. Improve your finances, not to show off, but to build a life where you never need to depend on anyone. Strengthen your mind, because as the Stoics taught, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The person who masters their thoughts becomes truly unstoppable. Picture someone who once felt lost, consumed by someone else's absence. For weeks, they let the pain define them, waiting, hoping, obsessing over what might change. But one day, they decided to take back control. They started running each morning, not for attention, but to clear their mind. They picked up books on philosophy, on success, on self-mastery, and learned things about themselves they had never explored before. They poured themselves into work, into new skills, into a vision for their life that had nothing to do with anyone else. Months later, when that person who once ignored them finally noticed the change, finally reached out, something had shifted. The need for validation was gone. The old wounds no longer held power. The silence had transformed not them, but themselves. That's the kind of change we're talking about. This isn't about making them miss you. It's about becoming the kind of person who doesn't need to be missed to feel complete. Now, maybe you're thinking, what if they never notice? What if all this was for nothing? But here's the truth. It doesn't matter. Their attention was never the prize. The real reward is what happens when you take all that energy you've wasted on worrying about them and redirect it into you. That's when everything shifts. That's when their reaction, whether they notice or not, becomes irrelevant. Because by that point, you'll be too busy building to care. Marcus Aurelius said, "A man's worth is no greater than the worth of his ambitions." So what are you aiming for? A moment of validation or a lifetime of strength? The moment you focus entirely on your path, on your growth, is the moment you break free. Let them do whatever they want. It no longer concerns you. Your energy should be spent creating a life that is so full, so strong, so purposeful, that their presence or absence means nothing. And when you reach that point, the question won't be whether your silence has impacted them. The real question will be whether you even want them back in your life. That is the power of taking control of your own story. That is what makes your silence speak louder than words ever could. So now it's time to act. If this message resonates with you, do something with it. Take this silence and use it. Not to wait, not to hope, but to build. Keep growing, keep moving forward, and never let your worth be dictated by someone else's attention. If you're ready to take this journey further, subscribe for more insights, like this video to help others find it, and turn on notifications so you never miss another lesson in self-mastery. Stay focused, stay grounded, and most importantly, keep building. 10th, stop hoping, start becoming. The waiting game ends today. No more sitting around, overanalyzing their silence, wondering if they'll ever realize what they lost. No more measuring your worth by their response or lack of one. This isn't about them. It never was. This is about you. about what you're going to do with the time, energy, and focus you've been wasting on someone who isn't even looking in your direction. The choice is simple. You can keep waiting, or you can start becoming. Think about it. When a tree loses its leaves in winter, does it sit there wondering if the leaves will miss it? No, it keeps growing. It keeps pushing deeper roots, strengthening itself from within, knowing that spring will come again. But by then, it doesn't even need the old leaves. It has already outgrown them. That's the mindset you need to adopt. Build yourself, not to get them back, but so that by the time they finally notice, you're no longer even looking in their direction. Seneca once said, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." And here's the truth. This silence, this space, this moment you've been given, it's not a punishment. It's an opportunity, a chance to step back, re-evaluate, and construct a version of yourself that is so unshakable, so undeniably valuable, that whether or not they notice becomes completely irrelevant. Picture someone who was once defined by a relationship. Everything revolved around that connection, their mood, their motivation, their sense of self. And when it was gone, they felt empty. But instead of sitting in that emptiness, instead of hoping for a return, they made a decision to fill that space with something greater. They started training, not just physically but mentally. They picked up new skills, expanded their knowledge, reconnected with people who actually valued them. And in doing so, they realized something. The version of themselves that was once desperate for validation no longer existed. They had become someone different, someone stronger, someone who chooses their life rather than waiting to be chosen. That's the real transformation. You might wonder, what if they never notice? What if they move on and never look back? Good. That means they no longer belong in the life you're building. The people who are meant to be in your world will recognize your value, not when you beg for it, not when you wait for it, but when you embody it effortlessly. When you carry yourself in such a way that your absence is undeniable, not because you wanted it to be, but because your presence was something they should have never taken for granted. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A man should be upright, not kept upright," meaning your strength should come from within, not from external validation. The moment you stop hoping for recognition and start living as if you never needed it in the first place, that's when everything shifts. So let them do whatever they will. None of it concerns you anymore. Your only focus should be on creating the kind of life that makes you forget you ever questioned your worth in the first place. A life where you don't wait, you become. And when you reach that point, you'll finally understand. The question was never, will they notice my silence? The real question was always, why did I ever care in the first place? Now, it's time to act. If you're ready to start this journey, subscribe for more insights, like this video to help others on their path, and turn on notifications so you never miss a lesson in self-mastery. Keep building, keep evolving, and never let your value be determined by someone else's attention.